Alright, we're going to dop a stone with wax. I have a garnet here that I have ground a flat on it. That's where I want my table. I normally shape them a little bit better than this, but I shaped the back so it's roughly domed, so it has a high point right where the center is going to be, right where the culet's going to be, and that helps. It helps during the dopping process, so that since I use a cone dop to center it, it'll center itself kind of in this cone, and it also just won't fall out. If you just leave it rough and uneven, you know, it's not gonna center. It's gonna want to wander off, and that's why I grind the flat on there, because then when I do this side, it'll hold itself where I want it. It's not always gonna work 100%, but it's better than just winging it, you know, and just letting the rough shape hold itself, and it's better than melting the wax and trying to eyeball it where you want it. So let me zoom this back out. Denatured alcohol, I use that to clean things. I'm gonna clean my dop, and I'm gonna clean the stone. At least where the table facet's gonna be. That's where your joint's gonna be, so that's where it needs to be clean. I have keyed dops. I mark my dops, so they're always all going the same direction. And I kind of put the holder dop, I guess that's what we'll call it, the holder dop. I put this one a little bit closer to here, so you have more metal that's being it's having heat removed from it, from the block here. And so when this one goes a little bit farther, there's a little bit more heat that's going to stick to this part. It just makes it easier. I set everything down in here. And I'm just I'm gonna snug everything, and you can see how it tightens up. And how it's not gonna fall out, and it barely moves even. So if the bottom is shaped really nicely, this allows you to rotate it however you need it for the center, and it'll hold itself in place. I've found that I always have to stop while I'm heating the dop, and I have to tighten it back up, just because, I don't know, there's physics going on or something. But you would think when the metal's hot it would expand, but for some reason it seems like things shrink, and maybe there's something going on. I'm not a physics person. I just I'm an artist, you know. I don't understand how things work sometimes. I just do them. So I'm just gonna take a few minutes here to center everything up how I want it to. I need 5.5 millimeters out of this stone, and I don't have a lot of room for error. So I just eyeball it as center as I can, and it's not flat up against the dop, of course. So I might have to. Okay, that's good. But it's not centered this way. I might have to edit this part out, because it can be a time-consuming part, because this is where you lose or make money. If you dop the stone wrong and you have to grind off a whole bunch of material to get your symmetry, that's a whole bunch of money you just wasted and turned into dust. But at the same time, that's one of the reasons why I dop with wax, because if I need to shift the stone, I just heat up the wax and I shift the stone. You can't do that with epoxy. You can't do that with super glue. There are benefits to each and drawbacks with each, but I prefer wax. I'm completely confident with wax. never had a stone come off the dop with wax. So that's what I use, and I like the flexibility. I like not having to wait for a solvent to dissolve the epoxy, and I like not having to heat up super glue, because when you heat up super glue you are releasing fumes that are not good to breathe in. I just like wax, and you could use different melting temperature wax. Like this is the brown wax. This is what I use almost exclusively. It doesn't matter if it's the first dot or if it's the transfer. And there's green wax that melts a little bit higher temperature, and I don't have any with me over here right now, but there's black wax that I'll use for sapphires and some other stuff that can handle a little bit higher temperature. So anyways, we got this centered in here as well as I can. Let's see if we can, there we go. See, it's pretty much centered. Like I said, you could always shift it after. And the way I do that, I put it on the machine and I'll kind of go all 4 directions. A 96 index, 24, 48, 72, and I'll go around and see where each end hits the lap, and I'll shift it as necessary. There's a few techniques to do that, but that's not part of this right here. But anyways, I have my brown wax, I have this ready to go, I have my lighter. Let's light the alcohol lamp. And at this point, I'm just trying to heat up this part right here. I'm trying not to get a whole lot of heat on the stone. This stone could probably handle some heat, but I avoid the stone until the last bit. But I'll just heat up this dop. You start to see water form, condensation from the heat. I concentrate my heat right at the fat part. And I kind of, you could feel, I guess, you could feel if it's hot enough, you know, but I just kind of go by what I'm used to. At this point, I will snug it back down just to make sure. A few more seconds in the flame, then I'll start putting my wax in here. You don't want to burn the wax. If it starts to smoke, it's going to lose its adhesion. You get the tip just so it's ready to melt, and then I always start in the back because it's the hardest one to get to. And I saw my stone move a little bit, so, and that's what I'm talking about. You think it would stay put, but it always loosens up. I don't understand why. The physics, I thought when metal gets hot it expands, but alright, so I got that back where I want it to be. And if you notice, the wax didn't take. It's stuck on there, but it's not. It's stuck to the stone a little bit, but it's not stuck to the metal. It's not stuck to the dop. So we need to change that. I'll kind of see if I could zoom in so you could see a little bit better what's going on. I'm just trying to heat up that dop a little bit more, and I'll start seeing that wax start to stick to the dop, because all the heat from the dop is making the wax stick. Now you can see how it's kind of started to stick onto the dop. At this point, I'll go back in with my wax, get it nice and hot, but not to where it smokes, and then I wipe more around the stone. That's good. And it's okay to kind of shape it a little bit, get an even coverage. This is really, really hard to make videos of this stuff. Alright, that's pretty good coverage. It's a pretty good amount of wax. I'm happy with that. But it's not adhered all the way. It's stuck on there. It might be okay, and a lot of people would probably leave it as is right now, but I'm not happy with this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back and I'm going to heat this part again, and I'm slowly going to move my way up. And when I start seeing the surface start to smooth out, then I'm going to move it down and do a few blasts of heat right on the stone, and you'll start seeing the wax kind of go around the stone a little bit. And that's what you want. You want to get the dop and the stone hot enough that the wax will stick. If you get it too hot, you're going to burn the wax, you're going to burn the shellac out of the wax, and then you lose your adhesion. If you don't get it hot enough, it might stick, but it's not going to adhere. It's not going to last. So let's get back in there in this heat. The air conditioning's on, and it's blowing my flame around a little bit, so it's kind of a pain in the butt sometimes, but it's starting to smooth out, and we're going to blast the stone. And it's not hot enough, so let's go around a little bit. And of course it's going to droop, and it's going to want to drip, so I just move it around and try to keep it even coat. And I'm not quite happy with the amount of wax on the back side, and of course it shifted again. Like I said, that little putting that concave on the back usually helps hold it really well, but for some reason things just move around a little bit. I'm going to just do a small amount more wax on the back side here. It's always the hardest part to get to, but first I'm going to make this a point again. So it's just hot enough that it's malleable, but it's not going to burn, it's not going to smoke, it's not going to melt. And when I put more wax on here, I'm just going to go just until it starts to droop and wants to drip. And it's all smooth and shiny, and it's just started to smoke, so we'll put a little bit back on there. Like I said, if you put it in the heat too much, it's going to burn. You don't want that. So now I start the process over again. I heat the dop. I want that wax to stick to the dop. This is probably overkill at this point as far as the heat on the dop, but I'd rather be safe than it don't come off. So we've already flowed. It's starting to sag, so then I start spinning the dop around. Sorry that wasn't in the camera. But you move it around. Some people will just set it down, let gravity pull the wax around the stone, but that's, some people do what they want, and that's fine. We all have different ways to do things, but at this point you can see you see shiny wax all the way around. I don't have a big ledge where the wax meets the stone, or where the wax meets the dop, so that means I have a good joint. Remove my little key, and I'll show you a little bit closer here. It's a shiny wax all the way around. And of course you could always do the, I'm not really yanking it hard, but I'm not being easy on it either. If it's going to come off, it'll come off. Yeah, but it's on there. And now I just have to trust that my flat is still flat. But even then, if it's not, when you do the transfer, the pavilion should sit right inside the cone, just like this did, and it'll kind of self-align, self-center, whatever the word you want to use is. And when I get to the point where I transfer, I'll be back and we'll do another video. But for right now, this is a garnet that needs to go in my color suite that I've been working on for well, since the beginning of time. And I have a lot of stones I need to cut for it, so I'm just trying to sneak a few in here and there. But yeah, that's my process for this part. I'll be back. And we're back. I finished the pavilion on this stone. I have a lot more material left over for the crown than I need, but that's a lot more than I need. But like I said, this is part of a project I'm working on where all the stones are 5.5 millimeter. So that's just how it's got to be. I normally don't like to waste material, but I'm trying to get these as close to this size as I can so I don't have to waste material. But anyways, we're going to transfer. I don't have any larger cone dops than this. I have some on the way. For some reason I don't have any. This is what I have. And I made this block too, this so it holds them. But I need this size cone dop. I got some on the way, but for some reason I don't have any. I was gonna wait to do this until I got those, but I think this one will be okay. I don't have a whole lot of support on here. Focus, camera. Now, the camera doesn't want to focus, so I'll hold it down here where it might. But it's kind of wax around it, so it should be okay. I'm not pushing real hard on the stone anyways, so it should be okay. But anyways, got my alcohol. I'm gonna clean the pavilion. That's where the wax is gonna stick, and of course clean the transfer dop. I guess I should call this the pavilion dop and call this one the crown dop. Anyways, I put my little keys in here. One thing I didn't mention before is the reason I notch my dops. You see there's a little notch in here. Come on. There's a notch right in there. So I could always have the dops facing the same direction in the jig and in the machine. The notch always points at the 96, and that just helps me. So if I have any misalignments or any problems with alignment, I know that my dops always go a certain direction, and it helps knock out one of the variables for trying to figure out why you have a misalignment or why things just aren't going correctly. But just like I did the last dop, the one I don't want a whole bunch of heat, I move it closer to the block, so this acts as kind of a heat sink. I rest these up against each other, but not squeezing, you know. And then we're going to do the process pretty much the same as before. I forgot to melt my wax back down into a nice that's good enough. So concentrate heat on the pavilion dop. For the crown dop, it's good to use a higher melting temperature wax. That way when you're doing this, your crown dop doesn't shift. That wax won't loosen up if it has a higher melting temperature than this. It's just like if you're familiar with doing jewelry. You know, you start with a higher melting solder, and you work your way down to a lower melting solder, so you don't undo your previous solder joints. It's a similar concept. And if you're familiar with soldering, wax it flows very much the same way. If both sides aren't hot enough, it's not going to flow or it's not going to stick. But I don't use a different wax on my crown dop unless I'm doing sapphire or it's just something that's just extremely important that there is no shifting during transfer. But everyday use, I just use the brown for everything. I'm concentrating my heat on the pavilion dop, and I'm trying to pay attention for when it starts to melt on the dop side. And once it starts to kind of stick to the dop, that's when I move it onto the stone, but just for half a second or so, just to get it going. I don't have as good a joint as I want. It's not as even a coverage as I like, so I'm going to kind of mold it around there. Sometimes it takes a few times. It's a patience thing. You know, it's not a messy get in and hammer it out real quick and then it's done. It'll take some time. But of course, the more practice you get with it, the easier it becomes, the quicker it is. I think that's just about it. I'm not quite happy with the blob, where the blob is. So I'll try to move the blob. Heating up the pavilion dop here just to get it softened up a little bit more. I'm going to keep the heat away from the stone as much as possible. Just get enough of the heat on the stone as you need to get the wax to stick to the stone. But most of my heat I like to come from the dop. And that's looking good. I'm happy with that. And I'm just moving it around to keep the blob from settling in one specific spot. And you can see, well, that was hot. You can see how we have focus. We have a smooth, shiny blob on each side. I normally don't like to see the crown dop as shiny as this, but I can still see some of the facets on the wax that correspond with the facets on the stone. I don't know if you can see it, especially there in the back. So that tells me it probably didn't move a whole lot. And it's in a cone dop, so it should hold it okay. You really have to heat this all the way through to get it to shift. Usually if it's just the outside, the inside's still hard enough to hold it. So now you might be saying, you know, we have a dop stuck on both sides. Or why didn't I heat this up to try to pull this off at the same time? Well, I have another method for that. Just heating my wax up, because I keep forgetting to do this and I go to dop and my wax isn't at a point, and it just kind of messes with my routine. So let me yeah, that stuff is hot, so you know, be careful. I've had the black stuff. I think the black melts at 185 degrees or something like that, but I've actually had the black drip onto my skin, and if you've ever been burned with a hot glue gun, it's like the same thing. It burns into your skin. You have to peel it out. It's unpleasant. So anyways, I got that done. I still have my lamp lit here, but I don't heat up the dop to get this off. I have my joint, I have it how I want it. I don't need to mess with that. No more heat until this is ready to come off. But But this is when I just have an X-Acto blade. It's just a regular X-Acto blade. It doesn't want to focus. There we go. Just a regular X-Acto blade in the heat. It heats up, and I just go down into that crown dop until I get the dop, and I scrape away the wax. Since it's only waxed around the outside of the dop, you don't need to get underneath it. You just go around the outside of it and remove the wax around the outside. And it gets rid of the joint. Doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to get it enough so that the joint is weakened enough that you could loosen it up, give it a tap, and you're free. Now you're ready to do the crown. And if you get wax over on the girdle facets, as I have just a small amount here, I'm gonna blow that out so I don't keep hurting myself with it. I just take a razor blade and just kind of scrape it off. Of course, it's nice to get the razor blade flat against the facet, and don't go too hard because you could chip it. But just kind of remove a little bit. This one's not bad at all. I'm just kind of going through the motions here just to show you what I would do. If it's really bad, you could always take the blade and heat it up and scrape it away. You know, but not too much, because you don't want to compromise the joint. So this is ready to go. I'm going to stick this back in my machine. And then for what's left of the wax on here, you could soak it in acetone, but the more wax you get in your acetone, the dirtier it gets, the more often you have to clean it. So I just take my hot knife and scrape off the most of it, or the majority of it. A little bit of alcohol. Remove the remaining wax, and it's ready to use again. So I'm gonna do the crown on this stone, and I guess I could come back and show you how I take it off. And we're back. The stone's done. And it's ready to come off. It probably doesn't look like much because it has wax on the back of it, which kind of affects how it reflects light, but anyways, it's just a nice little color shifting garnet. So same steps as before, during or after the transfer, with removing the crown dop. If you remember how I named the dops, so they're kind of easier to speak about. But I got my knife again. Here, we'll just put this. There we go. That's better. That'll work. Get that knife hot and just go around the wax. That's probably too hot. Obviously, I'm trying to avoid the stone. I don't want to touch the stone if I can avoid it. It's inevitable you're going to. Some stones, you'll leave a white spot that usually wipes off. I don't know exactly what causes that, It's kind of interesting, but with tourmaline and some other stones, you definitely want to avoid contact with the stone. Not only will the metal scratch it, but thermal shock is always a present danger. So now that I have it removed from the outside, for the most part, I'll just do a quick blast in the heat and then see if it's loose. And it is loose, and it just comes right out, and it's still going to have some wax on there. And if it's not too bad, I'll just plop it in the acetone. And I touch it to my lip just to see the temperature. If I feel any warmth on my lip, I will not drop it in there. I'll set it down on a piece of metal until it's cool, because once again, thermal shock will hurt them. Same process as before. Removing the wax from the outside. I don't want to scrape up the Dopping too much. Just kind of rubbing the flat end, or getting it flat on the edge and kind of scraping up, and instead of gouging into it, you know, because obviously you don't want to scrape up that metal any more than you have to. You start pushing a burr over the edge, and then there goes your flat surface. And that's done. We'll stick that back in our holder. And then, since there wasn't a whole lot of wax on here, it's probably clean enough to remove. You can see it in there. The wax turns white-ish. It gets a kind of a chalky white. At this point, this is when I take my tweezers, and I will use the tweezers to grab a hold of the paper towel if the stone will stay in place. But I'll grab a hold of the paper towel and I'll just kind of dab off some of that wax with the paper towel. It just makes it a little bit easier than having to do that with your fingers, because, well, on a stone like this, it's small. It's hard to get precise enough. Or you'll squeeze a little too hard and you'll shoot the stone across the room. And you can probably see it's a nice little purple color in sunlight, and it goes pinkish red color in incandescent. And I just took my denatured alcohol just for like a final clean. And this is how I dop and remove stones. I hope this helps. I know I didn't get any of the cutting process. That'll be a different video, maybe. But that's the stone. I think you can. It's focusing pretty good. All right. Yeah. So that's another one for my project. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps whoever's watching this right now. And maybe there'll be more of these videos in the future. I don't know. Bye.